Hello and welcome to New Earth Podcast. Today I'm delighted to have as my guest Enolia Foti, transformational coach, author, award-winning speaker, global influencer and grandmother elder. Today we're going to be discussing how Enolia's contribution to humanity at this time is training New Earth leaders. Welcome, Enolia.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, it's just lovely to have you on the podcast today, Enolia. So I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to find this path in life to start with.
Well, it's interesting. I was born and raised in New York City. I'm a Queens girl, a New Yorker through and through. And just like everybody else going to school, I graduated with a degree in mathematics, and then I entered into the job market. I found myself designing computer networks for a living. And during that time, I also got my master's. There I am in the corporate world, working with the corporate industry and learning a lot. I learned and was trained as one of the top leaders in my industry, leadership by invitation. And it's interesting, having gone through that there were still major and significant issues that many of us were dealing with, and they didn't have to do with leadership. They had to do with the human condition. They had to do with the backgrounds that we came from, the security that we felt or insecurity that we felt. It had to do with some of the traumas that we had went through and not necessarily addressed, and it showed up in the leadership. So I always kept that as like a footnote to understanding. Went through my corporate leadership, eventually decided that I wanted to do something more. And so meeting my first Indigenous grandmother elder, I found a different way of teaching and a different way of leading and a different way of living life. And I loved it and I embraced it. And that door opened my training to being and working with many Indigenous elders, both men and women, and learning from their cultures and learning from their cosmology and learning from them different viewpoints of life that aren't typically seen, not by the mainstream. And with that, I was able to develop, because training was always one of my strong points, my own methodology for training leaders that wasn't addressed. So I'll leave the story there.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful journey and transformation. I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper into the personal transformation that you went through. Because, my understanding of the corporate world is that it can be quite cutthroat. And, no doubt there's a lot that you learned from that you've actually brought into your training now. There's probably a lot of positives around boundaries, about standing in your truth, some of that you brought forward, but how you then integrated that knowledge of the grandmother elders, that sitting in a circle coming from the heart, and a whole different valuing of each individual, to shifting from competition more into that kind of sitting in a circle and valuing.
Yes. Well, I have to say that navigating the waters of corporate is definitely a challenge. And that's the key, is that many of us don't navigate the waters. Many of us who are the workers, we experience the waters, we react to the waters, and then we kind of swim up to get air, and we find ourselves drowning. We don't like the waters that we're navigating. We react again left and right to the waters. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Am I worthy for getting this? Or I have to fight and step on and demean and belittle the person next to me in order to get the air that I need and to be seen. And everyone's goal is to be in the center stage, and people, some do and some don't care how they do that. And so there you have the background. And so compassionate leadership, what is that? Why is that? And what I learned from my Indigenous elders is that there's capability of leading without feeling that anyone's above you and below you, in front of you, behind you, fighting to take your spot. That you don't necessarily have to be territorial in order to lift and make your point and rise up and rise up such that everybody benefits. And it's not just about being territorial. So those are completely polar opposites of what the corporate and the industry breeds into others. And some schools, some colleges breed that competition into you so that you'll do what it takes in order to lead. And when I discovered this, it was like a breath of fresh air. My own experience was that I had to learn to put my ego aside, put my ego down. And then when I made the mistake of acting by ego, for my own benefit, when I was corrected, it wasn't the typical way like it would have been in corporate, where you're hand smacked, you're embarrassed, you're belittled, and you're made to be felt small. But it was compassionate and loving. And then, the room for the mistake. It wasn't thrown back in your face. It was, and what lesson did you learn? It wasn't that I had to step on anybody else in order to achieve that leadership again. It was, this is how I can sit in circle and realize that everybody wins as I'm the leader. And that was a whole foreign concept.
I love what you're saying, Enolia. I love this idea of compassionate leadership and leading with the heart, because that's the transformation that we're all going through as we step into New Earth. It's stepping into the heart. That's how we arrive at New Earth, is through the heart. But what I'm seeing in the world is that, in terms of, the transformation into New Earth, it's happening in individuals, and it's happening in grassroots movements like the People's Health Alliance that I'm involved with. But we're not really seeing it in our leadership, in governments. We're not really seeing that in education. It's that old paradigm that's perhaps being installed, So how do you see that shift in terms of the work that you're doing in order to really lead, and form New Earth leaders, because, presumably a lot of people that are in leadership are operating it from ego, of wanting to compete and be in the center stage. So how do you see that transformation so that we can get in place the kind of heart-led people that you're wanting to train?
So Einstein always said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? And so how do we train our leadership? We train them by exhausting them, week-long training, intensive, they're exhausted, getting them to make decisions while they're exhausted. That's one methodology. I've been through that beautiful feat. Another way is that we believe that, here are the boundaries, here's the structure, this is how you train, this is how you repeat back, this is how you stay calm in the face of adversity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what none of the leadership programs do is they don't go back to your value system. They don't go back to the fact that whether you trust yourself or not, whether you trust your own decisions, how you view yourself when you look in the mirror. How do you deal with fear within yourself? And how do those fears play on certain situations when you're in leadership? How do you deal with judgment? How do you process judgment? How do you give your power away in the midst of judgment or projection? So none of them deal with that, and my program does. My program actually looks at 7 principles by which we already possess that truly forces you to look in the mirror and to truly embrace what you see in its totality. That when you observe and you notice who you are and what you do and how you respond, and you understand you may respond one way because you had certain trauma in your life, and that you have to acknowledge that, okay, in this regard, it's triggering me, and I need to work around that trigger and understand that I need to make an objective decision and not one based on my own pain and my own trauma, then that yields a different result. Because where am I when I'm doing this? I'm in my heart. I'm observing myself from my own perspective and how my heart operates.
That's incredible, Enolia. And actually, I'd just like to share that, you know, I've known Enolia for about 6 months now, and Enolia's become a dear friend during that time. I've just been so moved by the incredible work that she's doing that I've actually decided to become a coach and train, because it's just such important work. And particularly, you know, like I've taken this position in the People's Health Alliance, where I want to make an impact, and I just want to make it from the right position, you know, in terms of this. So, you know, leading with my heart. So I just want to thank you, immense gratitude to start with, Enolia, for all that you're doing, for the work that you're doing. You know, with me, it's been incredibly powerful and transformational. So I wonder if we could just start to break it down a little bit, because, you know, one of the first things, you know, to become a new Earth leader, you know, we've been taught really that only the people that are the leaders that, you know, that have the power take center stage. But part of the transition that we're going through at the moment as we step into the age of Aquarius, which actually started March 23rd, so officially we've entered the age of Aquarius now.
Okay.
It's power to the people. And so it's much more in line with this Indigenous idea of sitting in a circle and valuing everyone's unique contribution and everybody's unique way of saying things, of everybody's unique way, the power of the voice, you know, just using that power. So I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit first.
Yes, the power of the voice is absolutely essential. First of all, the generations that are coming in, they don't operate like the older generation. So the baby boomers did it one way, and they were quite conservative, and things had to be structured this way, or structure. And the generations that are coming in behind us, they usurp all rules that we came up with. And so, first of all, you need to acknowledge that and embrace that. Right? It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it right. It makes it different. So understanding that our youth are coming in with a different viewpoint and a different way of viewing life, then the old structures by which we train aren't necessarily going to work. That they are more in touch with how they feel, what feels good to them, how they enjoy working. They don't want to dress conservatively. They want to be able to express how they feel, and they want to be able to represent what's important to them with all their being. So understanding that, how do we cultivate and capture that strength and that understanding and that knowledge and that motivation and that ability to initiate that and bring it forward to some beautiful leadership that can help across the world? Well, first of all, acknowledge that they're coming in different. Second of all, the training needs to start with a foundation, and the foundation is a self-reflection. And that self-reflection is basically on a conscious level, understanding that everything you say and you do shouldn't be done unconsciously. It's akin to walking barefoot. When you take a step forward and you have your shoes on, you have no regard for where you're standing and where you're stepping. But when you take your shoes off and you take that step, you're acknowledging every step that you take, because you could get hurt. Your feet could get pain. It could step on something that's sharp. It could step on whatever. But the key is that we're conscious of everywhere that we're stepping. How do you engage someone to be conscious of what's verbally being said, of conscious that the impact of what they say has a ripple effect? You start off with understanding self. You start off with understanding that the power it carries in order to make the statements that you're making, and understanding the power it has when you are vibrating certain words. And I say vibrating certain words because we can put all of the hats on that we want to. You could put on your super mom hat, your super dad hat. You can put on your leadership hat role. You can put on your employee, your employer hat role. But what comes out of your mouth has power. And
Yeah.
to acknowledge that and understand it and be cognizant of it and be cognizant of the potential impact it has is important. And we disregard this. People say things without responsibility to what they are saying.
Thank you so much, and that's so important. You know, that kind of self-reflective, really, becoming conscious of what we're saying and the impact that that has. And I love that, the idea of walking barefoot, and really, that attention that we pay when we're walking barefoot. And the next question I'd like to ask you is, how do you feel? This idea of walking barefoot, like you mentioned, sometimes we become conscious that we might get hurt, perhaps when we were unconscious before. And certainly if we've had childhood conditioning, around standing, speaking, being dangerous, because perhaps we get criticized, or, we're told not to just be in the background as a child and not express how we feel, this kind of thing. How do you feel that we can overcome those kind of fears, particularly if they become more conscious because we're paying more attention?
So, this is part of the program that I actually work with people with, as you know. And the key here is that when you are, and I'm going to make it akin to a movie, when you're in the movie, things are happening around you and all you're doing is reacting. The character reacts this way, the character reacts that way. We react, and we feel like we're dodging bullets, but we're good at it, right? We're going to just dodge this bullet. She triggered me, and I reacted, and I realized she triggered me, and I reacted, and I reacted good, But the key here is to pull back from that reaction and be the observer. And if you are watching things unfold instead of reacting, then you can see that, oh, Sarah just said this to me and she triggered me. Now, is she purposely trying to trigger me? Because I realize that that's a trigger. I'm aware of my triggers. I know that what she said really hurt me, and what is the intention behind that statement? Was there an intention behind that statement? Was she trying to trigger me so that I'm off balance? And therefore I respond off balance, and then I deflect the point that was trying to be made. And it's lost because she got my emotions to kick in because I'm too busy reacting versus staying on point. Or is it that, the intention of what was being said was to trigger me, and I caught it and I said, trying to trigger me. Okay, well, let's just deflect that. I'm not going to respond to that. I'll let you flutter. I'll let you flounder because you knew exactly what you were doing. And if you knew what you exactly were doing and it doesn't work, who ends up floundering? Not me. You do. So there are key ways in order to address certain situations. Everybody loves to create a story. And we love to deep dive into the story versus watching the story unveil. And what you learn is you learn to stop reacting to every point, but to watch the story unveil and then choose how you're going to engage. And that's a different point to come from than reacting left, right, and every which way. And that in and of itself is powerful because you control what you do. No one else can control you.
I love what you're saying, this idea of stepping out of the story, because, often the story is on repeat. Often the story is like happened before and again and again and again, and until we see it, it's that kind of aspect that perhaps from our childhood, that conditioning that we're just replaying over and over, like what you said about Einstein earlier on, if we expect a different result doing the same thing. So taking that moment to, observe and step back and not react, I'm an energy medicine practitioner, and my understanding from quantum physics is observation changes reality. So that act, even if we do nothing, that moment of not reacting, of observing, has changed things already. So that is incredibly powerful. And I'd like to talk a little bit now about how we navigate that kind of standing in our truth, particularly if we're dealing with conflict, how we navigate that, because it's not always easy then to make the decisions, because once you've made the observation, you might wish to make different decisions to what you've done before. So you're stepping really into unknown areas and stepping outside of the comfort zone. So I'd be really interested to hear how you navigate all of that.
Well, the key is to trust yourself, Sarah. We have instincts. And the key here is that if you are dealing with a series of confrontation, one of the key things about confrontation is that it engages the emotions. And once the emotions are highly engaged, you lose thought and sight because the emotion is taking over. So if the anger is blinding, it's exactly what it is. It's blinding. If the attack makes you sad, then you're so busy dwelling in your sadness that you've lost sight of what is actually taking place. But if the observer is engaged and you're watching this confrontation, then you can say, here's the manipulation that's coming with the confrontation. Because confrontation is what? Someone wanting to impose their truth upon the other so that they can either get agreement or they can control or manipulate you into that alignment because they want their way. And so if you step back and you look at that, then without the emotions fully engaged, it doesn't mean you're not going to be emotionless, but they're no longer blinding. You can get clarity. They're trying to trigger me or throw me off my balance so that I'll react. And then I'll forget the fact that I said no, or I don't want this to take place. I want a different outcome. And then if we have the self-discipline to say, here's the fork in the road of my decision point. And with the fork in the road of my decision point, this is how I want to and I wish to engage. And I don't care what else is being said. Here's my truth. Here's where my position is. And I stand strong in it. And sometimes even silence marks that position very, very clearly. Then we are able to walk that path and navigate and watch the world around us unveil itself. And then we choose when to engage to give that answer. Otherwise, we can reserve back, watch, and say, you can confront all you want. My position's already clear. Or you can confront all you want. I'll give you an answer when I'm ready. And that pause that we take is the moment that we give ourselves for the clarity of what it is that we choose versus the manipulation of getting the result that is wanted. Because that's what projections and judgments and confrontations are, is a manipulation to fully extract the result that we want. So in understanding that, and we walk the road and we observe and we notice and we don't allow things to trigger us fully, we're human, it's going to trigger us to a degree, but we catch it and we can make a different decision. And how beautiful is it to make a different decision and at least get a different result other than one that we know where it's going to end and where it's going to land. Yeah.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom. That's going to help a lot of people, because I think a lot of people struggling at the moment, there's a lot of polarization in the world. So
yeah.
Navigating that and staying in peace with ourselves and trusting ourselves is incredibly powerful. I understand that another part of your program is forgiveness, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others. And, that is such a powerful practice. And, you know, it's what makes us more compassionate, you know, that learning, that self-love to be able to forgive, and, you know, to forgive others also. Is there anything that you'd like to share around forgiveness?
Yes, because to me, forgiveness is freedom. When we choose to harbor resentment, when we choose to hold a grudge, when we choose to make that the forefront of how we feel at all times, what happens is that everything else that we look at life through those eyes, with that resentment, with that judgment, is tainted. And so, you know, once we come across the similar situation, instead of making the decision that this is somebody I can trust, this is something I can instill in and plant the seed of like, you are powerful, you can do this. We see through those tainted eyes, and then we react as if it's already happened of what it is that pained us. Let me give you an example. For example, and I'll use my son. If my father was an alcoholic, and I have two boys, and my boys are now in their latter teens, and they're starting to drink. And my fear is, oh my God, they're going to end up being alcoholics. So how do I react? I react with that fear of already that they're already going to drink and they're already going to be alcoholics, and it's just going to pass on from like it was in the previous generation. So what happens is that I end up cultivating that because I'm already reacting to it as if it already happened.
Yeah.
And then the key here is that if I raised our boys right, and they have the seed planted that you do anything in moderation, you do not do anything into extremes. We take this as in anything in life, drinking or otherwise. And I treat them because I have trust for them. And I allow for the mistakes, because every once in a while they're going to come home having made that mistake and they'll learn from it. But I don't automatically assume and treat them as if they're going to be drunkards, drunks, and I don't chastise them. You're never going out. You're never going to do this. And I don't allow that in my house because this happened to my family. You know, then what I do is I give them an opportunity to have their own power and their own control and their own agency to execute and say, I can trust myself and I will not take that to the extreme. And my mother and my father trust me. So how we see life and how we make those decisions already implicitly has a result. And we can either cultivate that result in its negative aspect or its positive aspect. So by forgiveness, you're not forgiving people for what they did in terms of that. Sometimes, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, they did this, this, and this to me, I'll never forgive them. Okay, that's a different aspect. But how do you choose to see it? How do you choose to see it? Forgiveness of self says, I choose to not give my power away to somebody else, but I choose to take back my power by being able to view life the way I choose to view it, not tainted by what you did to me to look otherwise. So I think it's powerful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And this idea of, you know, where we're placing our energy again, you know, and it's something that I've been aware of for quite some time, you know, this, in terms of what's happening in the world at the moment as well, and fear-based narratives that are playing out, and almost like a predictive programming, you know,
Yeah.
of then people buying into it and then it manifesting or believe,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of, the anticipation almost makes it happen. So, you
Yes,
know, one of the decisions that I made was that I was, you know, rather than you know, looking at all this fear-based stuff, the news even, you know, being one of those things, was to really focus on which I wanted to create. That's why I love the People's Health Alliance, because it's really you know, based on building a new future for healthcare, which I love.
exactly.
You know, I love that shift in awareness. It's so important. So, you know, we can be aware of what's going on, but as soon as we're starting to get involved emotionally, then that's a different, you know, that becomes something else, because we're adding energy to that timeline in a way. So
Exactly.
yeah, so I'd love if there's anything else that you'd like to share about your program, and also if you can let us know, how people can enroll on this program if they're interested in it, because I can say personally, it's absolutely incredible. So if you can give the details of people in case they're interested to take part as well, and anything else you'd like to say about the program.
So I want people to know that I also wrote a comparable book called The 7 Principles of Self-Mastery that can go along with the program, that goes along with the program also. It tells you not only the origins of why I use the tools, the way that I use the tools, but also my experience with the tools and what I had to learn, so that you can use my story as a potential springboard for helping and relating to your own and seeing that you're not alone in having gone through certain situations. The program is definitely for those who are ready to change, but they're not quite sure how to transition into that change. They know that's something that needs to shift in their life. And I'm going to go back to corporate. There was a moment in corporate where I wanted to leave corporate, but I wasn't quite sure how to transition that. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I especially shared this with the entrepreneurs, because for corporate, you didn't know how to transition out of corporate, and then some people are just taking the leap. But you have to have a strong foundation, and that's what this brings you. You don't build a foundation of a house in sand, right? So if you know that you have trusting yourself issues, worthiness issues, you don't like what you see in the mirror, you want to change your life, address that and give yourself a strong foundation, so that when you embark on those entrepreneurial experiences, when you embark on entering into corporate, when you embark on making a decision that's going to be a leap of faith, that you fully do it on a foundation that really allows you not only to trust yourself, but to catch those manipulations when somebody is trying to throw you off kilter, to catch those projections and judgments when somebody is really has an intention behind it to again throw you off your leadership because you are progressing well. And to be able to be that observer, to understand that this is what's taking place and this is why. So that's what I address. I think it goes hand in hand with any entrepreneurial experience or training. I think it goes hand in hand with any corporate training and experience, or any institutional training and experience. It's a hand in hand program.
And it's called Empower, Achieve, Succeed Through Self-Mastery.
Yes, it is.
We'll put
Thank
the
you.
link underneath for anybody that wants to join that. But I believe you also have a coaching program, which I'm going to, once I finish this one, I'm going to be doing as well, because I'd really like to teach this work, because I just feel it's such important work.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I actually took all of this work and I developed a coaching training program. I have one coach out there, and I have 5 more in the funnel, and people are starting to catch on and starting to come through. And you being one of them, I'm so thrilled and excited about. And it's based on this work, this heart-based work. And the beauty about this is that it is world-based. So what this means is that the work is not dependent upon one particular culture, that anyone in any culture is able to go through it, because it respects all culture. It doesn't take one culture's viewpoint and press upon it another culture, but that it has the boundaries and respect for all cultures. So it doesn't matter what culture you come from. It doesn't matter if you're in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, in the US, or in Europe, that it's going to respect all traditions and everything, because you're doing inner work. You're not doing projected work from the outside.
That's amazing. And I believe you've got lots of stuff in the pipeline, haven't you, around where this could be taught? I know you don't want to share the details of that when it's kind of in process, but perhaps you can just give an overview of how you see the vision for this.
So I see the vision for this by training world leaders. I see the vision for this because, again, we have all of the leadership criteria that we need, but we don't have the underpinnings. And it is actually being evaluated as we speak for world leadership. And that includes government institutions as well as um, uh, global companies and global NGOs, as well as education institutions, and as well as corporate. So I'm
Super
really
exciting.
excited.
Really super exciting, and it's just what the world needs. You know, this coming into the education, this heart-based awareness.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to shift now over because you also do a lot of humanitarian work, which I've taken part in some of your conferences that you've done, you know, with the humanitarian work, and I understand that you go to, you know, you send people to school in India and do all kinds of things under the Expressions of Humanity branch, which is your humanitarian branch. Um, I wonder if you could just share a little bit about how that came about and the amazing work that you're doing with Expressions of Humanity.
So I'm really excited about Expressions of Humanity, and I'll tell you the story of how it got started. And I'll do that briefly, which is that I was at a beach called Benfica in Angola, Africa, and two girls almost drowned. And if you want to actually hear the story of what happened, you can go on expresshumanity.org, which is our Expressions of Humanity Foundation website, and play the story. And it's actually one of the projects because I want to teach Angolans how to swim.
Oh,
So two girls almost drowned. And it moved me so much. I was like, I have to give back. And I went home and I immediately created Expressions of Humanity Foundation. It was on my heart. It was the way that I could actually give back. And so what Expressions of Humanity is an foundation that actually acknowledges the activism of humane and humanity efforts that are going on around the world. And one of the things we love doing is we love sending kids to school. And we look to send kids to school in the underserved, and we look at youth leadership. So the underserved communities of the Quiros Indians of Peru is one of the schools where we have several kids that we're sponsoring. And what we do is we send them to school whenever we hold an event, like we hold the Speakers Forum platform event across the world where people can come in and they can speak. And a portion of that actually goes directly to the kids going to school. So if you're out there and you're a speaker and you have something on your heart to say, we encourage you to come contact us, be a part of our Speakers Forum, and directly affect a child going to school. I've been to India, I've been to Nepal, I've been to Mauritius, where we talk and work with children, and we talk to the youth leadership and let them know that they are the gift, and we are excited for them to come forward and be the leaders of our next generation, and that what they have to say is important, and that we care, and that they are the gift. So this is the work that we're absolutely thrilled to be able to participate with and start with and expand.
That's so beautiful, Enolia. And you know, like, our children are our future. So that's where the training needs to start. So, you know, it's so incredible that you've made this armor for your work to really make that happen. And I know within the People's Health Alliance as well, they're very much bringing in youth hubs and encouraging. You know, they have a children ambassador, June Tranmer, who I interviewed on an earlier podcast, and they're really bringing in that kind of voice, you know, to the children, so that we can start to encourage this idea of youth leadership. So it's very, very exciting. And I'm also very proud because I've been made a global wellness ambassador for the Expressions of Humanity. So I really want to do all that I can to support this amazing work as well. So thank you so much.
We're excited to have you, as well as 17 other ambassadors that are helping us to really just get Expressions of Humanity out there, and to identify projects that where we might be able to assist and help and facilitate, and then also, you know, bringing in funding so that we can help others. So it's beautiful, symbiotic relationship, and we love it.
And you have an incredible global summit coming up, which I'm going to be sending out some information about. That's called Envisioning Your Future. So it's
Yeah.
very much on this theme of creating new earth, new earth leaders, encouraging them to step up by giving a platform. I wondered if you'd just like to talk a minute or two about that event in case anyone would like to take part or register. We can put the link underneath the video.
Yes, I thank you so much. Envisioning your future is really important to us because what we want to do is we want to call out the leaders, and we don't care whether you're a corporate or an artist or a child. All of us are contributing and creating what our future looks like. And we want to know what that looks like to you and how you choose to impact. And so, whether you're a coach or whether you're a child leader, I love the Glory Foundation. Glory Foundation is one of those foundations where they cultivate and encourage their youth to speak their voice and to speak their heart every step of the way. And so we're calling on everyone. Show us and tell us how your art impacts the world. Show us and tell us how your youth leadership and what you want to see change impacts the world and shapes the world in its future. So we're really excited about the speakers platform, and we're really hoping that people will come out and really share their vision and share what they want to create in a future that they see.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. So is there anything else that you'd like to share before we finish up today? I'd love to hear a little bit about your, being a grandmother elder, because that's such a huge honor, and, it's just holding that energy is really quite something.
Thank you so much. So when I first met one of my first Indigenous grandmothers was Grandmother Isabel Mawasaki of the Ojibwe Nation. And she was the one who taught me my biggest lessons in life that started a whole path that I never knew that I would attend on, which is to really cast my net across the world and to help wherever I was capable of helping. And if you want to learn more about that journey, it's in my book, How I Found My Sovereign Voice with My Grandmother Elder, with its comparable journal that again does lessons learned for each chapter and then relates those lessons to your life and to you if you want to go that direction. But it tells about the story of how she shaped my leadership, how I put my foot in my mouth many times and thought that, my corporate ways were going to work, and how I just learned a different way. And that laid a part of the foundation of how I view and how I address the world today. And to go full circle back, it would be approximately 13 to 15 years later that I go back to Grandmother Isabel, and she made me a grandmother. And now I am what she is. And I impart that wisdom and that work and that giving of heart right back to the world as an elder, as a grandmother, and as a matriarch with the other grandmothers that traverse the world. And I'm thrilled and honored to be a part of that lineage.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that incredible journey, powerful journey. So are there any last thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today?
Yes, I always love to just leave you with one thing that you can do. Remember the power of your words and make them count, because somebody is listening to you. And the vibration and the power that you share with them is the ripple effect. And that which they receive will then go to the next person and the next person and the next person. And how you made them feel will go to the next person and the next person and next person. So make every word count, and know that what you have to say is important and is being received.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you on the podcast, Enolia. I've just really loved chatting with you and connecting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. What an honor it is to be here with you, and what an honor it is to walk the path side by side with you.
It's a beautiful journey, Enolia. And thank you everyone for listening today. Please do hit the subscribe if you've enjoyed today's podcast so you can hear some other wonderful speakers. Bye for now.